But Ryan is asking about defensive two deep. And I know that to me, and really if we're just concentrating on the defensive end position with Tuimoloau potentially coming in there, Zach Harrison, Tyreek Smith seem to be the two guys who are at the top of the list, most active, most productive last year. And that kind of comes with a grain of salt because Tyreek Smith had a grand total of 1 quarterback sack, and I think Harrison may have had 2. But at any rate, I'd have those 2 at the top of my list. And then on one side, I had Tyler Friday as the second team player. On the other side, I had Javonte Jean-Baptiste bracketed with the true freshman Jack Sawyer. And I would think if Tuimoloau comes in, he would be immediately in the 2 deep, you would think, with Friday, because you got to have guys that make plays at those positions. It's nice. We've got some other names here like Cormonte Hamilton, a converted tight end who I saw flash a couple times this spring in the limited amount of time that we got to watch. Darian Henry-Young is a young guy that potentially could get in the mix, and Jacoby Cowan is also there as well, it seems, although I think he'd been limited a little bit by injuries. So that kind of draws you out, everybody that's available. Potter, to me, I think has been repping a little bit more at defensive tackle, so I don't necessarily include him in that group. But that's kind of how it would shake out for me. I think JTT would immediately move right into the 2 deep, and the issue with that is, and I think maybe we've touched on this in some past shows talking about him, he is going to make visits, it sounds like, and again, Kevin may have a better idea, particularly about the schedule, but it sounds like Ohio State, Alabama, Oregon, maybe for visits for him in June. And Ohio State has a summer semester second session that begins June 22nd and runs till the end of July. The first session begins June 8th, and you can either take a 4-week session or an 8-week session that goes until the end of July. It's just how you accelerate the class schedule and everything. They give people different options to, work around the summer. The long and short of this is he could enroll June 22nd at Ohio State and immediately become part of the summer program, and he would desperately need to be part of that even for 5 weeks if he has any chance of competing and playing as a freshman at his school of choice, in my opinion, as great as he may be. Number 3 overall player in the 24/7 composite for 2022. To me, he would have to enroll and go through at least the conditioning part of it. How would you be ready to go through a preseason camp without the conditioning? So to me, that's kind of a drop dead date, June 22nd, for him to make a decision and enroll somewhere. So again, people want to know when's it going to happen. It's on his schedule, and he will decide when he's ready. And that's kind of how it's going to go. And I would put him in the 2 deep, but to expect him or anybody to come right in there, there's a lot of suspects, and we'll see if they're prospects this fall.
I mean, congratulations if you land him, but what does it mean if you put a guy that might get to have 5 weeks of summer and then go through fall in your 2 deep? Does that mean that you're not very deep to begin with? Does that mean that you don't necessarily have a lot there? I understand.
Those guys didn't make plays last year, Kevin.
Let's say JTT is a generational talent, and I'm not saying that he couldn't be, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to take a guy out of the 3rd row and put him in my bullpen and let him pitch the 8th. I don't think that's the right play. I still think he could see 10, 15. I think he could get the first year Zach Harrison treatment in terms of Larry's rotation, but while I don't doubt that by the end of the year he could not be pretty good once he gets his legs under him, he doesn't have his legs under him at this point. So yeah. I would be very hesitant to be foaming at the mouth and chomping at the bit to have him there in the 2 deep when Ohio State opens at Minnesota. That is a terrifying proposition. I just don't. I love the excitement. Excitement keeps all of us employed, but it's just a terrifying proposition to think about him being out there getting 40 snaps game 1 or game 2. I don't like the thought of it.
Well, and the Buckeyes returned 4 of their top 5 defensive ends from last year. Everybody coming back was in that rotation last year. I would expect them to continue to rotate. And then you feed in Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau into that somehow. I think it would be similar to what they did with Chase Young and Jonathan Cooper in 2017. Cooper at that point was a second-year guy, but Chase Young was a freshman. And you have the 4 guys that rotate, and then the 2 young guys will play a lot in situations that are favorable to them, in blowouts. And I remember talking to Larry Johnson about it, I think back in 2017, about how he didn't want to put Chase Young in situations that he wouldn't succeed in. So you want to build their confidence. And then as that confidence gets built, and as Larry Johnson says, you get more tools in the toolbox, then they play more, and then maybe they can become more solidified into the rotation. So I think it'll be interesting. They may play a lot early in terms of the blowouts, whatever blowouts there are, but their impact, their input into the regular rotation may happen more as the season goes on, when they play in the first quarter of a Wisconsin game, or Northwestern or whatever, and are part of the actual defense. But the 2 deep at the end of camp, I think it's going to be the 4 returnees, and then there's an or somewhere for Jack Sawyer, and I don't know that there will be an or for JTT just yet, just because he wasn't in here for spring. He's been doing basketball and things like that, but that doesn't mean in November he won't be making an impact, kind of like they've done with the receivers like Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, where they play a little bit early and then it just builds and builds and builds, and then by the end of the season they're a regular pretty much.
Kicking Michigan's butt.
Yeah. Joey Bosa in 2013, it took him about 5-6 games to kind of get his feet under him, like Kevin was talking about. And by the end of the year, he was a difference maker. But, the plays, it took him a while to build up that repertoire of plays. And he may have also come out of high school with a little bit of injury situation too, but that may have factored into it. So you're probably right. I think this is a guy that you get into the fold and you work him up, and maybe it's 5 or 10 plays in the first game and 20 plays in midseason and maybe 30 by the end of the year. But I think they have a lot of guys that they can play at those 2 positions. And I think what they're looking for is consistent, solid pressure on the opposing quarterback that they did not have this past year. Guys stood in and picked Ohio State apart at times. And I think that's something that, they just didn't have that Chase Young type player in there this past year.
And when I compare what's going on this year to the 2017 defensive line, that this is not the 2017 group of defensive ends where you had Nick Bosa and Tyquan Lewis and Sam Hubbard and Jalen Holmes. There is no second unit like Nick Bosa and Jalen Holmes. Tyler Friday and Javonte Jean-Baptiste have not done that yet. And so I think it will be easier for Jack Sawyer and JTT to move into that top 4. I just based on Larry Johnson's history with freshmen, it's not something that he normally does. And what Nick Bosa was able to do in 2016 was incredible, because he was coming off an ACL and gradually working his way back in camp. And he didn't come in for the spring. He was just a regular enrollee and working back, and finally full health, like, I don't know, a week left in camp, and then just steps in. And of course, one of arguably the best defensive end in Ohio State history until Chase Young came along.